So it's wonderful to collaborate on today's conversation and what we call at Project Liberty pop-ups. So I also want to welcome the members of Project Liberty's Global Alliance for Responsible Tech and send my greetings to those of you I haven't met. I'm really excited about today's conversation. It's such an important one. And so just a moment to tell you a little bit about Project Liberty. So we believe that we need to create an alternative to big tech. We need an internet and digital technology more generally that's dramatically safer, more humane, more decentralized, and more democratized and decentralized than what we see as the monopolistic data siphoning internet of today. So in our view, the internet of tomorrow returns people, not companies, to the center of our collective digital existence. So we're building an ecosystem of technologists, academics, policymakers, impact organizations like Ashoka, and citizens committed to a people-powered internet where the data is ours to manage, the platforms are ours to govern, and the power is ours to reclaim. And so we do that in a variety of different ways, including we have a protocol focused on decentralized social media. We advance research and insights, convenings, conversations, and dialogues, including the Global Alliance for Responsible Tech, which is a growing group of nearly 80 at this point impact organizations around the world with that believe in kind of the collective mission or the overlaps of our mission and come together to share resources and learning, activate collaborations. And so if you're interested, we can put our email in the chat. And if you want to learn more about joining, please reach out to us. But again, thank you to Ashoka for being there from the very start of Project Liberty, which launched just a few years ago. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Hene.
Thanks, Laura. It's great to have you here. And the whole point of this space is to kind of, like I said, build connective tissues as much as we can get our networks roped in with each other. I think the stronger we get. So that's great. I just want to say one thing about what we're about to do. If it's your first time. So we'll hear from Martin now for about 30 minutes, where he'll give us some context for Capito's work and where they've been taking it most recently with AI and large language models. And then we'll break for your questions, conversation, any challenges that resonate for you. You want this to be really a conversation. And Maria, my teammate from Ashoka, is going to be helping us moderate that part of the conversation. So Martin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anaya. Thanks to Ashoka, to Project Liberty, to OpenAI, to present us with the opportunity to engage with all of you on topics of justice, equality, feminism, liberty. I'm really happy about that. My name is Michael Gollogger. I'm product manager from Capito. I'm gonna give you this short presentation. I will share some slides and I will also show you our software. Just give me a minute to share my screen. One sec. Yeah, so let me just prepare this and then let's dive right into this. I briefly introduced myself already. Like, my name is Martin Gollogger. Maybe you weren't really sure how to write it, but that's how it's called, how to write it in German. I'm the product manager of Capito. I have more of a management background, but I've worked for several years now as product manager in different software companies. So I'm also happy to engage with you in technical topics in the end. But first, I want to briefly introduce you to Capito, to our company, and especially our vision, the why behind our solution. Why are we doing this? And our main vision, or our idea at Capito, is to create a world in which everyone understands everything. Because, right now, there's a lot of information out there that's very technical, that's presented at a very high level. But you know, there are people who don't have a very high reading proficiency, who have learning disabilities, who are just starting to learn a new language because, yeah, they needed to immigrate to another country. And these language barriers, they create inequality. They create barriers to participate in society. They create barriers to participate in the political system, to vote, to just be part and be choosing your own path. Like that's the main idea, and that's why we founded Capito 23 years ago in Graz, with the idea of translating difficult text into easy language, into easy to read. We still have our office here in Graz, but we created a lot of partnerships all over the DACH region with professional translators. It's kind of like a franchise system, and we have about 16 offices all over Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. In these 16 offices, there are over 200 professional translators who simplify complex information. And you can see it here on the slide. There are also 400 auditors with disabilities who read through this information, and they are included into the process of simplification. And only if they really understand the information and the simplified version, we are happy with the result. Only if they can understand it, we know that this is really a simplified text, and then it gets to our clients, then it is used in public. We have about 900 clients per year. And as you can imagine, over these 20 years, we created a lot of data. We gathered a lot of difficult texts, and we have the simplified version that is that was audited by people with disabilities on the other side. So there's a lot of data and a lot of information about what's difficult and about what's easy to understand. In this whole process, we developed a lot of criteria. So we analyzed our simplifications, we talked with people. There are already several networks who are doing easy to read and plain language for about 40, 50 years or so. And we used all this information to really define criteria about what makes a text accessible for everybody and understandable for everybody. And if you combine those two things, like you have a set of rules and you understand how something works, and you have a very large data set, you can start experimenting with AI, with large language models, and with transformer models. And that's why in the past 5 years, we engaged in several research projects. For example, with the Swiss Confederation, we are right now doing a research project since about 3 years on easy language in all the Swiss languages, like German, Italian, French, and also English was included. This year, we are starting a research project with the University of Barcelona. It's also in the Horizon 2030 program of the European Union, and it is about creating a platform for deliberative and participatory democracy. So for public conversation, public debate about policy. And again, here we will provide our expertise on how to make this accessible, how to make the information easy to understand. Because again, you can only participate in public debate if you can understand what people are talking about. And over these years, we learned quite a lot of things, and we released our software product a few years ago. It's called Capito Digital. this past summer in June, we released our AI-based simplification tool. And yeah, we already have about 3,000 users on our platform who are either testing it or already working for it. And we made quite a lot of progress in the past few years. How are we doing that? We have quite a fast-growing team of experts in web development, data scientists, data science, computational linguistics, marketing and sales. We really want to stress that we have female co-founders with over 20 years of leadership experience, because we also want to like stress the importance of equality in every regard, and this of course incorporates corporate leadership. We are currently a team of about 25 employees, and we won several awards in the social business domain. But now let's dive into our solution. No, so I'm sorry, I missed I missed my line. I really wanted to emphasize on the problem again, because there's also some data that that really proves our point. There's, for example, the OECD regularly does a study on the competences of grown-up people. It's about, for example, reading, about math, and so on. And they found out that only about 53% of people can understand texts in the language levels A1, A2, and B1. Maybe some context, you know it maybe from language. If you're a language learner, there are these reference points, reference level like A1 to C2. And the OECD found out that all over the OECD, half of the population can only understand A1, A2, and B1. But in another study from the University of Hamburg, they found out that, for example, in the German-speaking region, public institutions and companies often communicate in the language levels C1, C2. They want to sound smart, they want to sound proficient, use marketing jargon, or maybe use complicated language to fool people. And you can see the gap here. Companies and institutions communicate on a very high language level. People, a lot of people only understand more basic levels of language. So that's why we created a tool for text creators. So for people who write texts. First of all, we created a text analysis in those 3 language levels. So if you write a text, we created a scoring system that reads through the text, analyzes the text, and gives you an indication if your texts comply with the Capito criteria for easy language or plain language, so for the different language levels. So for example, if you are going to use our software, if you want to test it, and you see a score B1 of 100%, this means that your text complies with the Capito criteria to 100%. And if it's, for example, in A1, there's only 58%, you have some issues, you don't comply with all criteria, and a person with learning difficulties who only understands very basic text may has a problem understanding your information. So as a writer, this gives you a first indication when you're thinking about your target group, how good can they read? Do I really fit their needs, the needs of my target group? Is it easy enough? Then we also created a suggestion service. This is more like, I would say, a database, a morphological database where we added a lot of synonyms, easier phrases, words and phrases, and so on. And yeah, you can use these simplifications to maybe reduce complexity in a text. If you're dealing with, for example, people with learning difficulties, it often makes sense to explain difficult terms that must stay in a text. So sometimes you must use a difficult term because there's a legal obligation, or there is no easier term, and so on. In this case, it can make sense to add a dictionary, to add some examples, and add an explanation. Also, this may help the reader with learning difficulties to improve his learning proficiency, to learn new things, and so on. And we also added a database or an easy to read dictionary in our software. And when you write a text and there is an easy to read explanation, you can add it to your text. The software proposes it to you. And last but not least, the final step in our evolution, or the last step I'd rather say, is that we've added a fully automated text simplification. For this, we experimented with MBART transformer models ourselves, especially together with the University of Zurich. We tried to fine-tune open source models and so on. So we put really a lot of effort into making this work. We also tried to use our database, try to incorporate open source databases about easy language to train our own models. Right now, we switched, we pivoted to GPT 3.5 Turbo because, as you can imagine, like they have, I would say, a magnitude of a million bigger model, a lot more parameters, and the quality in generating text that has correct syntax and grammar is just way better. But for us, this is no problem. I will later talk more about our software architecture, but how we do this right now, this fully automated text simplification, is to use a state-of-the-art large language model to generate text. We ask the model to simplify a text with a rather complex prompting engine. And then we use our text analysis software that I showed you before, and this feature, and really ask the tool on a sentence-based level to resolve all the issues that our analysis system found. So we kind of created a service cascade that uses our expertise, our niche knowledge, and uses also a state-of-the-art large language model. Our tool is available as a software as a service solution in the web. There's a Microsoft Word add-in, an Outlook add-in. We have browser add-ons and API. So there are a lot of things for you to try out. I really suggest that you use our offer for a 14-day free trial. And you can also contact me if you want to, work with our API and so on. But we created all these interfaces so that it's very easy to use and that it helps people create simplified text everywhere they write, like in social media, at work, in private matters, and so on. Right now, it's available in German and English. I must admit that German, of course, is right now our best solution, but English is also working quite well already. We are right about to introduce French and Spain. Here we really want to introduce a beta version that's going to be very basic, only include a few criteria, a very basic scoring system. But our goal is to provide our service in as many languages as possible. Now I think I must briefly quit the screen sharing and like the sharing of the presentation and switch to a general screen sharing to show you my screen. And then I will show you our software directly. So I'm gonna finish the presentation mode. And now I'm going to, I've been at the Ashoka website before and copy the text, but now I'm going to switch to our website. So here I'm at digital.capito.eu. So that's the way also for you to access our software. Here you can also register for a 14-day free trial. And our software is very easy to use. You have a large text area. Here you can copy paste text. You can also write in this text area. And if you write text, there's automatically an analysis triggered. And after the analysis was done, difficult words and phrases and grammatical structures are underlined. You can see all those difficult words and structures in the mid section. For example, here our tool is telling me that I have about 13 possible simplifications. I think I will briefly switch to English in the UI. Sorry, I forgot about that before before the presentation started. So I can see that I've about 13 simplification. And also here on the right-hand side, I can see that the scoring is quite low. Of course, the scoring looks at the number of issues found. It looks at the length of the text, and it also looks at the severity of an issue, like how severe is this? How much does it add to incomprehensibility? But yeah, as a writer, I can now see words and phrases that I can make more easier. I can see if I have nested sentences where maybe add some dots and maybe remove some commas. At some points, there may be a suggestion for a more understandable word. And here you really need to be open and also think about like, what's my audience? Because here, for example, it's not very happy with the word change makers. And maybe you think, yeah, change maker, that's not a difficult word. But if you really have people with strong learning disabilities in your target group, they really need to have some cultural knowledge, must have read it somewhere, or someone must have explained it to them, because for them it's very hard to make the connection of change and of makers. And if it's together, the word, it's a word that describes people. So yeah, our tool can sometimes be a bit of an eye-opener if you're working with people with disabilities. Okay, this is something that may be difficult for them to understand. This is something that I need to work on. And here we have also a button for our AI simplification. And yeah, you can try it out. Maybe it resolves all the issues. Here, for example, it couldn't, for example, find an easier word for change makers, but it created a better structure. It fixed this nested sentence, because here, for example, there's only one sentence with this subclause, and for example, it made 4 sentences for this text. So you can see it makes suggestion and maybe makes your life easier to create a more comprehensible text. But of course, it's still not a perfect solution. So that's the software. I will briefly talk about few technical aspects of the software, and then I'm very open to tackle all your questions and also maybe show you some other parts of the software if you're interested. So I'm going back to my presentation, and yeah, I will briefly talk about our software architecture, like what technologies are we using, what our development was, like what have we done so far, and what have we learned. And I'm also happy for questions. But in general, the first thing that we really have to solve, and we are using Python, a spacey library for this, is to make our software understand the text input. And here we need to do tokenization. So for example, reducing the word and the lemmas and adding a token to it. We also need to do tagging, which is kind of like saying a word is a noun, a word is a verb, and so on. We also need to do sentence sizing, understand how long the sentences are, because this is also something that's important for understandability, and so on. So first of all, it's a very basic computer linguistic problem that also already has been solved. So there are, for example, we are using spacey, but there are also other options that provide tokenization, tagging, lemmatization, and so on for various languages. Then we created rule-based fallbacks ourselves. And this is kind of like incorporating our Capito criteria, which says, for example, don't use these nouns in A1. And these rule-based fallbacks can be very simple. Like we have, for example, rules that have a database access to a list of words that are okay. And if a pronoun is used that is not in the whitelist, we create an issue. Then we have lists of words that are not okay, for example. And here we have it the other way around. If we identify a word that is in a blacklist, it's a technical term. I'm not really happy about it when I read it like this. But it's been used quite a while. I think we will find something different for this. But here, if it's in this list, it will produce an issue. And then there are also several statistical methods that, for example, calculate the the use of words in a certain language. Like you can use the ZIP score. It's a very old statistical information, a method to understand how often something appears in a data set. And these scores exist for every language level. And that's how we can say, okay, this word is not used very often, and that's why you shouldn't use it. I mentioned before that we trained several MBART-based models with the University of Zurich on our own corpus. This corpus had about 45 million characters, about 10 million words. There were about 25,000 pages of analog translation. So complex information and 25,000 pages of simplified information. And we produced, I'd say, okay-ish results. Like if a company asks us to not use a GPT 3.5 model that is hosted by Microsoft, if they want to do an on-premises installation, if they don't want a cloud service, we happily provide them with our own models. But we really learned that the quality in text generation is way worse than, for example, even GPT 3.5 Turbo. Of course, GPT 4 is, for example, will be even more better. But still, it was quite okay. So you can look at it in a also in a bad light, because I think like a database with 40 million characters, 10 million words, in like twice, and once in difficult language, once in easy language, is also quite okay as a corpus. But yeah, that's why it wasn't enough, and that's why we made the switch to GPT 3.5 Turbo. And then we thought about like, now what are we gonna do? Are we like just a GPT app? Like what's our secret sauce? How can we really add value to this GPT environment, I call it, to these large language models. And that's why we focused on our analysis service, on our scoring system, and our rule-based fallbacks. And we created this kind of service cascade. I briefly touched it before. So if we send a text, like I click on the button, simplify with AI, we send a quite complex prompt engine that is also based on our scoring system. And we send these prompts to the LLM. And to summarize it, we ask it to make a simpler version that focuses on a few things. Then this first version is analyzed, the output is analyzed with our analysis service. We again get a list of 13, 30, 100 issues, difficult words, grammar structures, and so on. And we ask the GPT 3.5 Turbo again to resolve all these issues on a sentence level. Like if there's a clause, if there's a wrong word, it should remove it and resolve it. And we can, do as many iterations as we want. We are currently testing this almost every other day in our development area. Like, how long does it take? How big is the improvement if we make more circles, more analyses, and so how does it affect performance, quality, and also time and costs? But our secret sauce is now, like, we don't really do fine tuning of the LLM because we don't have access. We don't change the LLM, but we do, I would say, a really high level and sophisticated prompt engineering in this service cascade that really produces much better results than if you would just use GPT-4, for example. So that's how we really use our expertise. And that's also how we set up our software architecture. I don't want you to get too confused with these of these logos and with our architecture design. But I just wanted to show you that this large language model part is something that we totally outsourced right now. That's this Asia thing, because we are using a GPT 3.5 model that's hosted in the Netherlands by Microsoft in the Asia cloud. But we try to keep it out of our core system, out of the picture. So if we, for example, need to do an on-premises installation for a customer, we, instead of using Azure, we are just removing this area and just go to our own model. And also, I talked with Sachin before from OpenAI that we are really looking forward to, or hoping for, a very strong and high quality open source model, maybe from a university. Because of course, customers and also we ourselves are not always happy with using Microsoft or OpenAI service, and you're never sure, like, also what customer thinks about this and how using those services from those companies affects privacy and so on. But if in the future, for example, there will be an open source model that's easy to fine tune, that's very performant, that's not much worse than GPT, for example, GPT 3.5 or so, we can just remove this Asia cluster and speak to a new model. It doesn't really matter, because our secret sauce is our expertise in easy language, our criteria catalog, our scoring system, our analysis service. And we are just using large language models as the engine for text generation, so that the text makes sense, has no typos, and sounds nice and is grammatically sound. Yeah, and that was it. So, like, our vision is to make text more easy to comprehend, to understand. We created these software tools by training our own models. Right now we are using GPT 3.5, But for us, it doesn't really matter. We will use the model that's best and that's creating the biggest impact, and that hopefully helps a lot of people to take part in society, in political debate, because they can finally understand information text they read. So thanks everybody for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Martin. I think it was great. You gave us a great overview of Capito, Capito Digital, your services, challenges that you have encountered, and I think we were already seeing some questions, and I can imagine people have some things to comment on. And I love that you actually used us as a use case with Ashoka, because I feel we are not the best at simple and understandable communication sometimes. So it's great to also reflect this on ourselves and how we can become more understandable for everybody. So I just want to open the floor now for anyone who has questions. I saw Nick, you were already commenting on the chat. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and ask it out loud, or if you prefer me to just read. Yeah, I see you're muting.
Sure.
If you want to jump in, great.
Yeah, happy to jump in. Thanks so much for the presentation, Martin. This was really fascinating. I was wondering, as you were describing your kind of process and incorporating multiple loops and multiple runs with LLMs, if you've experimented at all with incorporating that proprietary model that y'all developed from your very, very interesting corpus and history of doing this work, along with the GPT model, to see what that kind of process would look like and what those outputs would look like, in addition to doing rule-based stuff.
Actually, we did not. So this is definitely something that I will move forward. I must admit that our own models, so they were quite okay from a performance perspective, because they are a lot smaller than GPT. But yeah, they produced not the best language. So this was kind of our issue. Like, they produced sentences that had grammatical errors and so on. And maybe that could be also an issue, that kind of like those two services interacting so that they don't really work together. But it's definitely something that I'm gonna forward to our computer linguists, because maybe really we can make some improvements. Maybe add loops to our cascade, but saving some time, because our model is much smaller and much faster. So maybe doing the first simplification with our model and then asking GPT to do the other iterations. It's an interesting idea. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just thinking about like the expertise that GPT has in the grammar and improving sentence structure could just be applied to the simplified model, the simplified outputs that you get from your own. That could be an interesting path forward.
Cool. Thanks for the
Great
input.
stuff.
I see Joe also is asking in the chat. I don't know if you want to jump in, or you prefer me to go ahead and read the question out loud.
Yeah, I was just one thing that I'm curious about is like biases that have been found in the AI, and especially regarding like different regional variations, and the idea of like difficulty, and perhaps like the concept of difficulty being like wrapped up in like biases around what is like more formal or better, and what is worse or easier or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely encountered bias, especially while using GPT. So racism, also sexism, and the thing, like, how we tackle this problem is that we created not only like rules for understandability, but we used our the same logic for bias. And I really asked one of my coworkers, create a list of sexist phrases, of racist phrases, and we just added it. And this is another check now in our software. So if you're gonna write down a racist slur, or if GPT does something like this, our tool finds it, hopefully all the time. But we encountered this. Here, this is something where our model was way better, because these social issues are very relevant in our organization for all our partner companies. We're a social business. All our simplified texts are free of racism, of sexism. So this is really something that we focus about. That is also part of the review process. So our idea is making things understandable, but yeah, people with learning difficulties, should also understand that people are equal. And regarding, yes, I think you also mentioned regional dialects.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we are very interested about. I'm from Salzburg in Austria, from a small mountain valley. I grew up on a farm there were no people around, and sometimes they can't understand me here in the office because I have like a strong dialect, and so sometimes there can be learning or understand like difficulties in understanding, also from a regional aspect. And we have customers who are asking for this. I think we can create kind of like checks, but we still have to experiment how good is GPT in this regard. And I think it won't be very good because there's just not so much text about, for example, Salzburg Austrian dialect. But this could definitely be also one of our secret sauces, because tools like Grammarly and so on, these writing tools, they incorporate now also large language models and add things like tone and so on. And I guess they also add things like simplification. So they will definitely be our competition in the future. And I guess for a lot of people, they will provide okay-ish results. But I'm not really sure if they really do it for people with disabilities, with learning difficulties. And also if they could be able to really be very specific, like for regional dialects and so on. So this could definitely be something from the business side where we're gonna evolve and find our niche.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it goes to show just how much sensitivity and like actual human care goes into the work of this.
Dele, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but yes, just feel free to jump in.
You did a very good job on pronouncing my name. Thank you. Excellent. Fascinating presentation, and really great work that you guys are doing, and it gets me thinking on so many levels. But what I think fascinates me most, and where I see this going, is this sort of meta layer on top of these large language models, where you're able to bring this layer of processing intelligence, and not fine-tuning of the models, but almost like fine-tuning of the service that sits on top of the model in that sense. And I think this process, but as you were explaining, how you basically have this sort of very sophisticated prompt engineering framework that interrogates GPT, gets results, based on those results, then feeds back, etc. So I just wanted to understand, I'm working on something very, not similar, but using a similar process in that sense of iterating back and forth between LLMs. And I wanted to understand how complicated that process was in terms of accessing GPT's APIs and using them in that manner, and what sort of problems you encountered as you do those iterations back and forth before you present the answer to the end user.
So from a technical standpoint, it's very easy. So connect as like, for example, accessing the OpenAI API is very easy. Also, accessing GPT 3.5 hosted by Microsoft was very easy from a technical standpoint. If great documentation. I mean, it's like very basic REST, I think REST API calls. No issues here. Of course, they don't allow for a lot of experimentation. I don't have, like, for example, with free characters, like free tokens. So I think you have to pay from the start. Maybe you can maybe you can try ask them, because you're working on a social cause. They already started the experimentation before I joined in, so I'm not sure what we paid at the beginning. But now we have their general pricing model, where I should have asked before. I didn't think about this question. I can ask our CTO or our CFO for the pricing per token, but maybe they have it on their website. So we pay normal prices for every call. And for GPT-4, you really have to ask, and we've been on a wait list for a few months, I think. So there they make it also quite like just from an operational standpoint, make it difficult to access. But the API is very easy to use. Also our API. So if you are thinking about creating something with our simplification capabilities, we have all the information on our website. So if you register, there are all the access codes. And you can play with our API for sure. So we are very open for other people expanding on our services.
Excellent. I'd love to do that. I will definitely reach out and find out more about that.
Please, you can contact me for sure.
Lovely to see some of these connections happening already. Lisa.
Hi. So I have a question about taking this into the legislature or rulemaking sector. I've seen others, I think they're on this call, that have put laws and regulations and other information into many other languages in India. But here, you talk about dialect. We have a dialect in the legal community, and sometimes it complicates things. And I could see an application working well for legislative committees that are trying to put real meaning in law, or at the municipal level, just different rulemaking, local rules and the like. How would you go about scaling this up or targeting that community? I know it would take a lot of convincing when you work with lawyers and judges. They need to be convinced that something like this is helpful. But any conversations you or anyone else on this call have had, and what do you think about that in the legislative and rulemaking part?
So we have kind of like a small scale solution for this problem in the banking sector. That could also work in this regard. So we recently could get a huge financial player here in Europe as a client, and they need to use certain words just for legal reason, even if they're not easy to understand. On the one hand, they also need to serve the EU Accessibility Act, and starting from next year, they are only allowed to communicate in the language level B2. So they have this they are in a very difficult environment, but they have their banking language, lingo, that they need to use also in contracts and so on. And we didn't only sell our software as it is right now, but we kind of like sold a whole project to them. They will send us about 30 to 35 different texts that are simplified by our human translators, that they will be also validated by people with disabilities. That's to create some very specific data. Also, our human translator will mark every word, every phrasing that's difficult in this contracts and so on. And then we're just gonna walk through with them and with the legal department and look at every word and say, do you need to use this? What could be an easier word together with our translator and so on, like the very hands-on approach. And then we're gonna adapt all our rules, add to our black and white lists, to our algorithms and to our scoring system. So we have this, we call it fine tuning, and yeah, for us, it's kind of like a consulting project, a fine tuning project.
Yeah,
And that's
what a
also
tough
something.
area. Whoa, banking. Yeah. You picked the highest.
Yeah, and it could also work in the justice field, but it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's a tricky pickle, yeah.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, super interesting. A great example. Before Satsin, I wanted to pick up on the question from Saki on the chat, asking Martin if you can speak about the importance of involving historically marginalized communities in the design and training of these large language models.
I think it's a very difficult question. We didn't really account for this in our research projects. I think we accounted like in our like in the data generation. This of course was an issue, like trying to get rid of anything sexist, racist, and so on. But we didn't really yeah, we're concerned with this in our training. And also, I think it's quite difficult, and it also requires this hands-on approach. As you mentioned, I am just reading your message. For example, slurs that only those people know. Yeah, that's why we must get into a conversation. I told before, our solution with the bias was that I asked my coworker to create this list, but maybe it's also up to us to ask people from these groups, from marginalized groups, if they can add to this list, if they can, if there's anything they that we didn't accounted for. I think this is not so much like in our case about training an LLM. It's more about creating these rules around the system, around the LLM. And here it's about talking and engaging with people who are really affected and having this hands-on approach, I guess. But tricky question.
I guess it's a continuous improvement process, no, on how to involve other voices and ensure like those are in the criteria.
Yes.
Yeah, we are really close to time, so Santi, you might want to come in with your question, and then we can wrap up and share what's coming up for the next session.
Yeah, no, really quick add on to what Martin said to Lisa. Lisa, we've worked with regulators in India. So security is the equivalent of SEC in the US. And the challenge is they will use those words. They're very deliberate about certain language, right? So one is you can go to the source and change that language, but of course they are possessive about that language and they want to use, or you can create translation layers on top so that somebody can query that language and get simple answers, in the way they want it. So if somebody looks at a complex document and the source, the people who made that document are not willing to transform it, you can at least build layers on top so that anyone can look at that document, ask a question and get an answer. Now, that has also become possible. So there are both ways in which you can increase access. One way is simpler language at the root, like Martin and the team are doing, and the other is at different layers on top of it. So that layering approach on top of it is interesting. There's still some work to be done there, because when you depend on a GPT or whatever to ask questions on top of a complex document, if it's a technical document, sometimes GPT will make a mistake. And therefore, some degree of systems need to be built, like the way that Martin and team are building, to even help the querying on top of a complex document. But these are just different ways in which we can extend that same vision of, simplifying, of making everything understandable, which I love, by the way, Martin. I love your mission. Okay, back to you folks.
Fascinating, Martin. Thanks a lot for joining us today and sharing more about Capito. I'll pass it on to Anna, and then we will wrap up. Thank you everyone for coming today.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Thanks, Laura, Joe from the Project Liberty team, and the whole community that joined. Everybody from the Agami and OpenAI community as well. There's more coming next week. We're speaking with Paul Radu, Ashoka Fellow, founder of OCCRP, that is working to investigative journalism outfit, working to fight corruption networks around the world. It'll be another fascinating conversation. We hope to see you again here then. And I'll put in the chat also the playlist where if you've missed the previous sessions, you can catch up, and we'll be following up over email. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.